New York City, January 7th, 1943. A hotel maid knocked on the door of room 3327. No answer. The Do Not Disturb sign had been hanging there for 3 days. She opened the door slowly. On the bed, a man, thin, alone, within hours, before his body was even cold. Government agents arrived, took everything, every paper, every notebook, every equation. National security, they said. The man who lit up the world and the darkness of night dies in the dark. New York City, 1884. He stepped off the boat with 4 cents in his pocket and a letter folded carefully in his jacket. Nikola Tesla was 28 years old. He had crossed an ocean with almost nothing, leaving behind a Europe that had never quite known what to do with him, arriving in a country he believed would be different. The letter was addressed to Thomas Edison. One sentence inside it would stay with Tesla for the rest of his life. I know 2 great men. You are one of them. The other is the bearer of this letter. Edison read it, looked at the tall, thin young man standing before him, put the letter down. He offered him a job. Tesla accepted without hesitation. Edison's laboratory felt like the closest thing to the world as it should be, a place where the only question that mattered was whether something worked or didn't. Tesla understood that language completely. It was the only language he had ever been fully fluent in. What he did not yet understand was that beneath that language, a second one was operating. A language of ownership, of credit, of who attaches their name to what, and who disappears into the machinery of someone else's legacy. He would learn it, as he learned everything, the hard way. Menlo Park, 1884 to 1885. Tesla worked the way he always worked, completely. There was no version of him that did anything partially. When his mind attached to a problem, it attached with the full force of everything he had. His attention, his sleep, his hours, his meals. Edison noticed, and Edison used it. The assignment was not small. Edison's entire direct current electrical system needed rebuilding from the ground up. It was the kind of project a sensible engineer might estimate at 2 years of careful work. Tesla did it in months. He worked through nights without sleeping. He redesigned components that others had declared unfixable. When the work was done, it was done with the thoroughness of someone who does not know how to do anything halfway. Edison had made a promise: fix the entire system, and the reward would be $50,000. $50,000, enough to build a laboratory, enough to fund years of independent research, enough to make real everything living in Tesla's mind. He went to collect it. Edison looked at him with the relaxed confidence of a man who has never worried about consequences. "Tesla," he said, "you don't understand American humor. No money, no acknowledgement." The promise had been made the way powerful men sometimes make promises to useful people, as a management tool, not a commitment. Tesla stood very still, then turned and walked out of Edison's laboratory. He never went back. That winter, to survive, he dug ditches in the streets of New York. A man who had rebuilt Edison's entire electrical infrastructure, moving dirt with a shovel for $2 a day. He did not complain about this to anyone who recorded it. He just kept thinking. New York, 1887 to 1893. The idea that would define Tesla's life had been living in his mind for years before he had anywhere to build it: alternating current. Edison's system ran on direct current, DC. It worked. but it had a structural limitation that no amount of engineering could fix. Direct current lost power rapidly over distance. To light a city, you needed a power station every mile. The infrastructure costs were enormous. The inefficiency was permanent. Tesla's alternating current could travel hundreds of miles with minimal loss. One station could serve an entire region. The mathematics were not close. The physics were not in dispute. Edison understood this immediately, which is precisely why he did not engage Tesla on scientific grounds. He chose a different battlefield entirely. What followed was one of the most sustained and deliberately dishonest campaigns in American business history. Edison traveled town to town, publicly electrocuting animals, using Tesla's alternating current, dogs, calves, to brand AC power with a single word in the public mind: death. He lobbied for alternating current to be used in the electric chair. He called it being Westinghoused after the businessman who had invested in Tesla's work. He was trying to defeat physics with public relations. In 1903, the campaign reached its lowest point. An elephant named Topsy was publicly electrocuted using alternating current. Filmed, distributed, the message explicit. This is what Tesla's electricity does. Tesla did not respond with press releases. He responded with demonstration. In 1893, his system powered the entire world's Columbian Exposition in Chicago. 100,000 lights, an entire city built for one purpose: to show what alternating current could do when allowed to do it. The crowd that stood in that fairground watching the lights come on had never seen anything like it. Edison's campaign did not survive that night. You cannot frighten people away from light. The war of currents ended. Alternating current became the global standard. Every power grid on Earth was built on Tesla's system. Edison was celebrated as the father of the electrical age. Tesla filed the patents and received almost none of the money. New York, 1900 to 1903. There is a kind of hope more dangerous than despair. Despair is stable. It asks nothing of you. Hope that arrives in the form of a powerful man with an open checkbook. That is the kind that can take everything you have left and leave you with less than you started with. J.P. Morgan was the most powerful financier in America. When he agreed to fund Tesla's next project, it felt like the tide turning at last. Tesla's vision was staggering. Wardenclyffe Tower, a structure on Long Island that would broadcast electrical power itself wirelessly across the world, freely, to anyone with the equipment to receive it, not sold, not metered, not controlled by whoever owned the infrastructure, free. Tesla believed this was the logical endpoint of everything he had worked toward. Electricity was not a product to be sold back to humanity at profit. It was a natural force that science had learned to harness. The appropriate response was to make it available to everyone, and the way sunlight was available to everyone. Construction began. The tower rose. Then Morgan asked his question: if anyone can receive the power freely, where do I put the meter? It was the only question that had ever mattered to him, and it was a question Tesla had genuinely never prepared an answer for. Because in Tesla's architecture of the world, the meter was not the point. The electricity was the point. Morgan withdrew his funding, not angrily, with the calm efficiency of a man adjusting a portfolio. The tower stood half-finished on Long Island for 14 years, a monument to the precise distance between what human ingenuity can imagine and what human greed will permit to exist. It was demolished in 1917, sold for scrap to pay Tesla's debts. Tesla was 47 years old. He had nothing. He went back to work. New York, 1900 to 1915. There is a specific injustice worse than being robbed. Being robbed is clean. Someone takes something from you, the transaction is clear. What happened to Tesla was different. His ideas were not stolen in a single act. They were absorbed, slowly, quietly, professionally, into the work of other men who had the resources to develop them, patent them, and attach their names to them before Tesla could do the same. Guglielmo Marconi transmitted a wireless signal across the Atlantic in 1901. The world celebrated him as the inventor of radio. He received the Nobel Prize in 1909. Tesla had demonstrated wireless transmission years earlier. The technical foundation of what Marconi built was, in substantial part, Tesla's work. Tesla said so. Edison, with particular satisfaction, supported Marconi, because supporting Marconi meant not supporting Tesla. The Nobel went to Marconi. Tesla received nothing. In 1915, a newspaper reported that Tesla and Edison would jointly receive the Nobel Prize in physics. It was, briefly, the closest thing to official acknowledgement the scientific world had ever offered him. Neither man received it that year. The Nobel went to someone else. There is no confirmed explanation for why. There are theories. They are not flattering to the people involved. Tesla continued working. He kept generating ideas at a rate that should have made him one of the wealthiest men in America. Remote control technology, early radar concepts, the rotating magnetic field that forms the basis of virtually every electric motor built in the century that followed. The money never came. The ideas kept going into other laboratories, other patents, other people's fortunes. New York, 1915 to 1935. Tesla had learned, slowly, over decades, that the relationship between what you create and what you receive for it is not a contract, is not even a loose agreement, is almost entirely dependent on factors that have nothing to do with the quality of what you made. The years after Wardenclyffe were years of diminishing resources and undiminishing work. He moved through smaller laboratories and smaller hotel rooms. He worked on projects increasingly difficult to fund. He had no partner, no colleague who knew him well enough to push back. He had always moved faster than everyone around him and had never learned to slow down enough to keep anyone close. The loneliness was not incidental to what followed. It was structural. A mind like Tesla's needed contact with other minds, not validation. He had never needed that, but resistance, the productive friction of genuine intellectual engagement. Without it, the extraordinary and the untethered began to occupy the same space, and it became harder to tell them apart. He fed the pigeons in Bryant Park every day. He knew individual birds, mourned when they died, spent money he could not afford on food for them. People who saw this saw an eccentric old man. They were not entirely wrong. What they missed was that the pigeons were the last relationship in his life that asked nothing he could not give. Hotel New Yorker, 1933 to 1943. The Hotel New Yorker gave him a room at a reduced rate in the last decade of his life. Room 3327 became his world. He worked there. He thought there. He ate alone every day at the same table in the same restaurant, tipping precisely, addressing the staff by name, unfailingly courteous to people who had no power over anything that affected him. He had a clarity in those final years that was different from the clarity of his middle age, quieter, less invested in being understood. He had spent 60 years trying to give things to a world that kept taking them without acknowledgement. He had made peace with this the way a man makes peace with weather, not by approving of it, but by understanding that his approval was not required for it to continue. Asked once late in his life whether he was bitter about Edison, about Morgan, about Marconi, about all of it, he was quiet for a long time. Then he said something that has stayed in the record of his life, like a clean, undeniable fact. The present is theirs. The future, for which I really worked, is mine. On the 6th of January, 1943, he asked not to be disturbed. The next morning, the maid knocked. No answer. She opened the door. He was 86 years old. He had been dead for several hours. The government agents arrived before the day was out. Every paper, every notebook, every equation removed from the room with efficient, unhurried professionalism. National security. The man who had spent his entire life trying to give his work to the world had his work taken from him one final time, on the day he was no longer there to object. The world, now. Here is what Nikola Tesla left the world. Every electric motor running in every factory, every hospital, every vehicle on Earth operates on the rotating magnetic field he described first. Every power grid on Earth transmits electricity using the alternating current system he developed while Edison was electrocuting animals to discredit him. The radio that won Marconi a Nobel Prize was built on foundations that the United States Supreme Court, 40 years after Tesla's death, quietly, without ceremony, acknowledged as his. The radar that guided aircraft through the Second World War, the wireless transmission architecture that underlies every piece of technology in use today, the conceptual foundations of the modern electrical world, all of it traceable in whole or in substantial part to a man who died in a hotel room with nothing. There is a version of this story that ends in tragedy. In that version, the lesson is about the cruelty of powerful men and the vulnerability of genius and the unbridgeable gap between what a person deserves and what the world actually delivers. That version is true, but it is not the complete truth. The complete truth is that the work survived. Every single thing that was done to suppress it, diminish it, redirect credit for it, erase it, none of it worked. Not permanently, not completely. The ideas were too structural, too woven into the fabric of how the modern world functions to be separated from their origin forever. You can take the papers from room 3327. You cannot take the electricity from the walls. Tesla understood this, not as consolation, as fact. The future he worked for was not contingent on whether the present acknowledged him. It was coming regardless. He had simply pointed it in a direction and kept walking. That is not a tragedy. That is something rarer and harder and more durable than victory. He arrived with 4 cents. He left with nothing. And between those two moments, he lit the entire world. Every light you have ever seen, every one his. Every great business started with a moment no one believed in except one person, a moment of doubt, a moment of silence, a moment where everything could have gone the other way. You just heard one of those moments, and somewhere in these books behind me, there are hundreds more of those moments, stories that changed industries, decisions that built empires, failures that no one talks about, but everyone should hear. The next story is already waiting for you. Subscribe, because whoever shows up next, you don't want to miss them.